And here we go. It is another Pittsburgh Hockey Now live chat on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now and actually Pittsburgh Hockey Now YouTube channel and the Facebook platform. I am Dan Kingerski, and we are going to have a little fun today. So here's how it's going to break down. I'm going to set the stage. We're going to get into the reason, the fundamental flaw has many, many fathers for this Penguins team. We're going to get into why they can't hold a lead, and it's not necessarily a pleasant topic, and the answers aren't necessarily what you want to hear, but that's my job. We'll do that. Coach Francis Anzalone is going to join us, and Francis had some really interesting thoughts, and I'm curious to see which way our conversation goes. So we're going to get into Kyle Dubas and Mike Sullivan, how it's all interconnected. And yeah, it's a web. It's an intricate web that is interconnected, that, one thing leads to another, but this, A equals C plus D equals B. And we'll dive into all of that, where the fault lies of Sullivan, where the fault lies with Kyle Dubas. I will offer this first caveat, though. I'm tired. Not because I have a lack of sleep. That I'm used to. I'm worn out. Every single thing I write, 10, 12 replies. Fire Sullivan. Fire Sullivan. What is it Winston Churchill said? A zealot is one who can't change the subject. And a lot of you are getting really zealous. That's fine. But you have to have more thoughts. If you watch Erik Karlsson play defense and say that's on Mike Sullivan, you might be a zealot. The ground rules are simple. Disagree. You can be angry. You can argue. That's all fair game, especially on X and on here. That's why I do this. You can't come belligerent. You step ugly, well, I'm going to stick it to you for my own amusement. And I might bring your mom into it for my own amusement, just like your mom. So we're going to do all of that today. That's how this show is going to break down. So there's the caveats out of the way. This will also be available as episode 7 of the No Pucks Given podcast. Let me get the link so I can invite Coach Francis on there. There we go. Okay, so in a few minutes, Coach Francis Anzalone will join us. I think Francis's insights have been extraordinary. He has filled in some of the puzzle pieces that I have been missing, perhaps missing over the last couple of years. But let's start with Mike Sullivan before we get to Kyle Dubas, because I think holding the lead is part and parcel to both of them. And I'm coming to some very finite conclusions, especially on Sullivan. And that is, I don't think he'll be the coach at the end of the season, at least under the current trajectory. That doesn't mean that he should be fired. I think it's quite unfair, but that's the life of a coach. You pay the price for a lot of other things that go wrong around you, out of your control. Every coach knows that. That's just the price you pay for being a head coach and being very handsomely compensated. The Penguins' defense is, at this point, brutal. There's no other word I can use to describe it, at least in any sort of family-friendly environment. It's terrible. It's ungodly bad. Mike Sullivan today after practice, that's where I was, we were a few minutes late because literally Sullivan wrapped up somewhere around 12:40. I hop in the car, I speed down I-279. Wait, let me rephrase that. I would never speed. We get into the studio here and we get this fired up. Sullivan flatly admitted that Matt Grzelcyk over the last 10 games has not been good. He didn't use those words. he could help us more in the breakouts and in the defensive zone. He very kindly said what I've been telling you about Grzelcyk. I've been using the adjective puck watching, where Grzelcyk is just getting caught flat-footed watching the play. That is an issue that speaks to the player, but also to Mike Sullivan's defensive system. Here's one of the second caveats that I think drives fans, even fans of mine, nuts. I cannot let incorrect statements stand. You might come to the right conclusion, but if you have the wrong reason, I'm going to correct you. There are a slew of family, friends, and girlfriends of the past who will tell you the same thing. I'm infuriating that way. I can't let it go. The amount of people, well, Mike Sullivan's system is terrible, who then give incorrect information about the system, 99%. 99% of you have no clue what that means. But you see a head coach, you see a team losing, and you assume, because I think too many people in this town are football fans, where coaches have really become micromanagers, almost like Xbox players with the controller in their hand. The NFL has gone there. Hockey has a little bit of that, but it's moved away from it in the last 20 years. The Russians, actually, 15 years ago, were like, absolutely not. That's not how this is going to work. And they kind of broke the molds with a lot of their players, Alex Ovechkin certainly being one of them. And people began to realize how much better free form within a certain system or structure is. You can't control players. You get, there were a handful of coaches 15 years ago who really had rigid systems, and you stand here, you go here, you do this, you do that. Automatons. They were just, they were robots, and those teams were never successful in the playoffs. They got run out of the building when better teams came along. When they opened up the game, those teams got swept into the dustbin of history. So with that kind of said, let's talk about Mike Sullivan's system. Before you say, fire Mike Sullivan, understand what we're doing. I did a little bit of this in episode 6 of No Pucks Given when I played you the 2-minute long Sullivan explanation of what Michael Bunting was doing better, which included, it was predominantly what he's doing differently in the defensive zone. And I asked Sullivan to basically explain all of that, what it means to be better in the defensive zone. And he just obliged and hit all of the points. Sullivan's defensive system isn't really a system. It's a set of decisions. It's more of a philosophy, if then else. It's almost like a computer programmer. It's almost like AI, if you want to know the truth. It relies on 5 players to understand their position on the ice, other players' position on the ice, and to make corresponding decisions. If this player's here, I go here. If I'm the first one back, I do this. If I'm the second forward back, I do that. It's not a rigid structure. It's a set of decisions. Well, it takes a certain hockey IQ to execute that. It also takes a little bit of speed to execute that. And while the Penguins roster, I thought, was getting a little quicker, this is why I wrote on, what's today? Thursday. Why I wrote on Thursday that I don't know if Sullivan and Dubas are on the same page. Because, quite frankly, the players that Dubas brought in, especially this summer, but also last summer, were very structure-reliant players. Also, this past summer, everyone except Anthony Beauvillier was not a great skater. I thought Matt Grzelcyk was a better skater than he's shown. We know Kevin Hayes has issues in that department. Cody Glass is probably an average skater. And so the groceries delivered to the coach's doorstep weren't exactly in keeping with the meal he wanted to cook. And that's why I think Sullivan will ultimately pay the price sooner than later. Let me tell you what I'm seeing inside the locker room recently. the last few days especially, and I've had this confirmed by people on the inside as well, the team has been remarkably dispirited. There was a noticeable thud. It was tempered by winning the shootout against San Jose, but losing to Tampa, they understood exactly what they gave up. They were not happy, but for the first time, there was a sullen acceptance, a sadness that followed that, because they don't have any answers. Because Sullivan would have to essentially upend the team. He has shuffled every line. He has used every possible combination, but ultimately the players are the players. And he is not blessed with players who can execute this if-then-else sort of defensive system. Ryan Graves, defense or system reliant. Believe it or not, Erik Karlsson, system reliant. His best years were in Ottawa in that 1-3-1 under Guy Boucher. His other best years with Pete DeBoer in San Jose. DeBoer is another systems kind of coach, at least a certain rigidity to Pete. He comes to the Penguins and he has to think and read and react. He said a while ago, this wasn't really for print, but I think it's germane now, that he hates beer league hockey or, summer hockey because it's so unstructured. He gets lost in it. He's like, I can't do it. Well, there's a certain aspect that Sullivan's system has in order to maximize the efforts of his star players. All right, I think I've said enough here. I know Francis Anzalone is waiting patiently, and I think he has to bounce at like 1:30, so I think I get 10 or 15 minutes with him. Let's get Francis in here. Francis, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dan. This is a really interesting topic that you have stumbled upon in your columns and here on this podcast.
Well, thank you, because I wanted to pick your brain about it. Your opinion of the fact that I think Dubas has delivered players incongruent with Sullivan's desires, Sullivan's systems, and as much as they might like each other or the relationship, whatever it might be, certainly better than the last GM coach relationship here in Pittsburgh. It doesn't seem set for success. I'll put it that way.
Well, with a salary budget of $87 million and an operating budget in the hundreds of millions of dollars, you would like to think that a general manager and a head coach are on the same page when it comes to free agent signings, roster construction, etc. It's kind of funny to think that they're not. There are 32 general managers and head coaches in the National Hockey League. So I think it would be pretty sad if we ever found out after the fact that some of these players were signed without Mike Sullivan and Kyle Dubas being aligned, especially with Sullivan being such an important piece, we think, to the powers that be with Fenway Sports Group. When I look at what's happening right now, Dan, it's interesting. John Tortorella, a coach that I have a lot of respect for, has basically said following the Flyers' last two losses against the Avalanche and the Hurricanes, two teams that he believes are very much the standard. We have to accept and embrace the reality, I'm somewhat paraphrasing here, that we have to be dead on every shift. And when we are dead on, we can compete with and beat these teams. But our margin for error is very slim and thin. What the Philadelphia Flyers have done is they have drafted, they have signed, they have acquired players that fit that message because there is a bigger overall that they are aiming for. The Pittsburgh Penguins are a team right now that appears to me, Dan, and you just seem to allude to this, as being very dejected and downtrodden by the reality that they have to be dead on. They have to be dead on with their rush coverage. They have to be dead on with their sort outs. They have to be nearly dead on with their puck management against the bottom half of the league, against the top half of the league. And I think that is a huge issue with this team right now. They are not built to be dead on. And
well, they've got way too many players who are not guys who play dead on. With all respect to guys who are super talented, Erik Karlsson and Evgeny Malkin, but you also have lesser talented players who are not guys who are often dead on. Michael Bunting would be a prime example of that, a guy who does some good things, but he can drive coaches nuts because he can also disappear or make a lot of mistakes that don't necessarily show up on the box score, except on the scoreboard.
Correct. And there's 2 points I would add on top of that. Like this whole thing, what's wrong with Matt Grzelcyk? What's wrong with Matt Grzelcyk? We could debate it till the cows come home. And I love doing that and peeling back the layers just like you. Matt Grzelcyk is elevated way too high in the lineup, as are so many other players.
He's playing as a top pair defenseman. He's playing against the other team's best. That's a tall order for him right now.
Yes, no question. I mean, I believe this was the Boston Bruins' 5 or 6 defensemen last year.
Well, he actually had fell to 7th. Right.
Yes, and he watched some games from upstairs. And I was a big fan, if you recall, post-training camp of the look of him with Chris Letang. But that's why, a lot of general managers and coaches say you got to give your team 20 games. You really don't know what you have until you hit the 20-game mark. I think we know what this team is right about now when we look at it. But even some of the top players, I think, just struggle with this reality of how dead on the Penguins have to be. Sidney Crosby no longer has his wingman, Jake Gensel, to help him get the minus back, so to speak. So I just think this is something, it is a reality that is permeating through the team. I think I have a bit of sense for how this can wear on players, wear on a coaching staff. And I think that's what you're seeing. That's what you're reporting. That's what you're hearing when you talk about the overall temperature of the locker room right now.
Yeah, it was a little bit surprising to me after some of the previous losses that the dispirited nature hadn't already crept in. I thought perhaps they were in a little bit of denial, if I'm being blunt about it. But nevertheless, they were soldiering on. It was always, okay, we like these good things, or okay, we were just crap tonight. Flush it, move on. Now they can't. Eight multi-goal leads given away. That is more than most teams will do in a season, and they've done it in 21 games. That, to me, speaks really to the two things. It's the roster construction on this hand. Francis, and I want to kind of dive into this. You and I have brushed, or kind of superficially gone into it before. I don't think Mike Sullivan's high-end system, or system meant for high-end players right now, is where this team is. I think this system designed for very good players to excel is lost or wasted on lesser players, and they're struggling with it because they're just not good. They're not good at it, and I think those two things combined just lead to bad things.
Yeah, I think it's really important here to distinguish between system and style of play, or identity, if you will.
Because I've been calling it a philosophy. Maybe I'm going entirely off the hockey map in terminology.
Yeah, and your explanation of Mike Sullivan, I would say, is extremely close, if not bang on, to what I know of Mike Sullivan. And you can Google this stuff, Dan. I can drop links in the chat here for you to post on the channel for the fans and the audience members that are really into this stuff, of Mike Sullivan giving coaching presentations, talking about how hockey is an instinctual game. Mike Sullivan is a regimented, detailed coach who walks the fine line between giving players too much structure and just enough where he doesn't take the stick out of their players' hands. I actually have a clip of Sullivan from about 2 years ago that I use with my teams before training camps, where he talks about sufficient structure. That's the word.
Oh,
he
that was
uses.
his term a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Sufficient structure. And what Mike Sullivan does is he gives his players guiding core principles that does not eliminate the thinking from the game. Dan, 90% of the coaches in the National Hockey League approach it the exact same way. You are correct. The last regimented structure we saw was the Los Angeles Kings using a 1-3-1 in the Stanley Cup playoffs to try to slow the Edmonton Oilers down. Even Guy Boucher and the old 1-3-1 in Ottawa. We got to remember the 1-3-1 is a forecheck used in the neutral zone to either, one, slow the opponent down, or two, allow your D to go back for more pucks. That's why Erik Karlsson loved playing for Guy Boucher, because he was first touch a lot on the breakout. So what I would say to some of the audience members, the way the Pittsburgh Penguins, their system and their style of play, there's really only 3 or 4 systems in the game today. Coaches flip on a dime if they have to, because the situation somewhat requires it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of how Sullivan approaches this, very similar to most coaches in the league.
I think he was the originator as well. If he wasn't the originator, he was certainly well ahead of the curve. I think that gets a little bit lost. So when Dubas says something like, if we fired Mike Sullivan, we'd be looking for Mike Sullivan, he's correct. By the same token, when you give players who are begging for that structure, Ryan Graves, who maybe excelled is a strong word, but who was very serviceable under Lindy Ruff, who is a kind of a rigid stand here, go there sort of guy. And Erik Karlsson was very much the same way. And Matt Grzelcyk was much better under Bruce Cassidy, who has a defenseman-friendly system. Certainly in Vegas he does. I can't speak too much to what he did in Boston, but in Vegas, Cassidy's system is 2 gargoyle defensemen at the front of the net, and damn it, you're not getting anywhere close. And everybody else sort of fills in around it. I know Boston sort of had a structure like that Grzelcyk could not have to think as much or not have to skate as much. Charlie McAvoy did those sorts of things. Now that they find themselves in the deep water with Sullivan, I see a lot of these guys drowning, and that's my best analogy for it. Just came to me too, by the way.
Yeah, and obviously much different roster constructs in those examples.
True.
You know, I was a big fan and a student of the great Jacques Lemaire, who you remember. And
the master of the counterattack trap. Yeah.
To the audience members that want, they think structure is the issue. I mean, what would happen today in 2024 if Jacques Lemaire walked into a dressing room? I mean, I wish there were more of him. But the players today are different. You and I have been over this. The game today is different. I think
the way the guys skate today, they would carve up Jacques Lemaire's system.
Yeah, it's a really, really fine line coaching today, and the old topic of structure. We've got a situation here where, the comment about Mike Sullivan's future. I mean, there's going to come a time. I agree with you. I do not see him being the coach at the end of the year. The reality is very few of these arranged marriages, GM and coach work. They only last so long. Kyle Dubas's last one out so well in Toronto. I do think there does come a point in time where change just needs to happen, because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, the same way, trying to get the same result. I think we're almost there, maybe there now. But I'm not going to say that it's because of the system. I'm not going to say it's because the players have tuned out the coach. I think
I don't want to. I want to make clear. I'm not saying the players have tuned out the coach either.
It's a general statement. I believe that this group is a bit down and dejected. The reality that they have to be dead on. And I just don't think this group, as it's constructed now, is built for that reality. And then the overarching macro issue is it's just an organization that appears to not really have a vision or a purpose. And if the vision or purpose is what has been communicated previously, which is to try to keep this window open as long as possible and go for it, it's the wrong vision.
Well, Kyle Dubas out on his TV show last night, Francis, I guess today's Thursday, so it was on Wednesday. He had some things to say about that where he is both baking his cake and eating it too, and he's trying to cover all bases. We're not rebuilding, we're not retooling, we're trying to be competitive, but we're also stocking for the future. And clearly, that's not the reality that the rest of us are seeing. And so there's a very big chasm. There's a canyon between words and reality here, which I think is adding greatly to the frustration of the paying public. If you tell these people, listen, we're still trying to support Sidney Crosby as absolute best we can within these constructs, but right now we're rebuilding while trying to keep Sidney Crosby somewhat happy and give him a shot to make the playoffs. That might hold some water rather than we're doing all things for all people, and which it's why they're 7-10-4.
Yeah, look, I live in Pittsburgh. I don't need to live here. I choose to live here. One of the things I love about this place is this is a sports town. People are, for the most part, blue collar and straight ahead. I think if there's any market that can embrace the reality of where this organization is at, it's this market. They just want it delivered straight, and they want it delivered consistently. And I think that one of the best jobs articulating a rebuild, retool, whatever R word you want to use, is right down the Pennsylvania Turnpike in Philadelphia. Penning an open letter to the fans, being brutally candid and direct, and keeping the fans in the loop at every turn. There's a level of transparency that I think the public in that market has appreciated. I think this market would appreciate it as well. I have to wonder, and I think you just touched on this, if that hasn't been done yet, there has to be someone or something not aligned behind the scenes, because it's just so blatantly obvious what needs to happen.
I will
here.
tell you, I will answer that. And the Penguins are now owned by a hedge fund. They were bought by a hedge fund because of all the land around the arena, because that hedge fund likes heritage logos and likes to inflate their value and kind of ride the inflation wave, ride the wave of growing franchise values. And then, they kind of steer the course, stay the course. They don't make great big changes, as Red Sox fans are finding out, as Liverpool fans were pulling their hair out screaming for changes. That's not really where their day-to-day attention lies. Francis, I know you had to go. I've kept you 5 minutes, a little too long, but man, I thank you. You course corrected me a little bit. I appreciate that. I always take it into account.
Yeah, I would say this to wrap up. I always enjoy coming on here. It's great to read the comments from the audience. I think our audience here is thirsty, is craving for just the reality to be messaged and embraced. To me, if you as an NHL team are not on a Stanley Cup journey in some way, shape, or form, you are going nowhere. I think the 32nd ranked team in the National Hockey League can be on a Stanley Cup journey, just like a top 4 team can be. It's a much different journey with a much different trajectory. And that's what concerns me right now for this organization, is they're a little bit of no man's land. What you just talked about, that's the real story here. That's the deeper story. I understand it might not get the most likes. I understand it might not get the most views, but that's the big and real story. The behind the scenes. Because until that gets sorted, we're really not going anywhere here. But we'll keep talking about it because we love it, right?
The season's 6 more months. Francis, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Be well. Take care, everybody.
All right, now I'm going to kind of dive in to a second tier of the opinion on Mike Sullivan, because where's all my, oh, wait, there it is. Let me add that. There you go. Get a look at Sullivan instead of my ugly mug. By the way, like and subscribe as you join the live chat here. There's a big part of me that feels like Sullivan is being hung out to dry, both because of the roster construction, but also, as Francis and I were talking there, about the lack of communication from up high, from in the middle, or even just above Sullivan. He is kind of, listen, Mike Sullivan is there every day talking to us reporters. He's there today. He was there yesterday. He's the guy answering for all of this. When I think, a GM can't answer questions every day like Sullivan does. There'd be no reason for it. But by the same token, a GM has to answer more questions, because this format and formula where the GM gets to say what he wants every couple of Wednesdays or every few Wednesdays without pushback, I think is adding to your frustration. I think you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. But I took a lot of heat when things were really good, when I would ask tough questions. Now I think some of those tough questions are very warranted. And there's a reason why we don't get to ask them, because I don't think they want to answer. I don't think Dubas wants to have to answer some of these questions, because it really is, it's both in flux as he's trying to figure out how best to get from A to B and then B to C. And it's not going well. So we've kind of, I don't know if we've beat up Mike Sullivan. I hope we've informed, we've added insight, color, context, all of that. Now let's talk about Dubas, because a majority of the acquisitions over the last 2 seasons have indeed not produced what was expected from Ryan Graves and Erik Karlsson. They've weakened the Penguins' defense because of their ill fit here. And I don't mean that as a personal slap or even a downgrade of their abilities as players. You have eyes. I don't need to go into that very much, do I? I don't need to explain to you exactly why, or, is someone going to take the con position there and say Erik Karlsson's playing great and Ryan Graves should be the top defenseman? I don't think I'm going to get any pushback there by just saying, well, you understand what I don't have to say. On the forward side, I think Anthony Beauvillier might be the best acquisition on the forwards crew in 2 years. Because of necessity, Noel Acciari gets shoved into the middle, where he's a subpar center. Matt Cook's always been really good to me. We've had some good chats and some fun chats and all of that. And he's explained why at center he's very conservative and doesn't produce, and you don't notice him like you do when he's on the wing. By the way, like, subscribe. I don't understand why Sullivan hasn't adapted to that. A couple weeks ago, I asked about Noel Acciari and the difference. For the first time, I asked Mike Sullivan, and he kind of agreed that they've had conversations where they want Acciari to be more like his winger self when they put him in the middle. But there's only so long you can keep doing that and expecting anything different. There's only so long you can keep putting him in the middle. So that's one Sullivan, I think, personnel mistake. The other is being corrected when that's Drew O'Connor in the middle, by the way. I think Drew O'Connor is infinitely better in the middle than he was on the wing. I was thinking about this as I was racing home from practice, trying to think of an analogy, and the best I could come up with was in my young radio days when I was working at DVE 3WS 1059. I was kind of I was the 24-year-old gopher who did every job in the building except clean the toilets, and I probably would have done that had they asked me. At one point, they did ask me to be the traffic guy, and I was like, no. That was the first time I had said no to them. And I filled in for several weeks, and then I had filled in for several more weeks after that. But Parkway West outbound is stacking and packing coming out of the tunnels. Parkway East outbound is back to the jail. There's an accident on the Veterans Bridge, so be careful there. It's backing up traffic. I'm Dan Kingerski. He's like, good God, no, I am not doing that for the rest of my radio career. Absolutely not. No chance in hell. My heart would have never been in it. And I sort of wonder, I think Sullivan saw O'Connor as a power forward and was always waiting for that other shoe to drop where O'Connor embraced and attacked the role. O'Connor did it as best he could, but it wasn't truly who he was. Now that he's in the middle, what he truly is, and he knows he's a center, look at the huge difference there. I think Mike Sullivan has made just about every change he possibly could, with the exception of going to a more static defensive zone coverage instead of the if-then-else that we talked about, 30 minutes ago. So if you're just joining us, go back to the beginning of the show, catch up, and then join me here at 36 minutes on the No Pucks Given and the Penguins live chat. All right. We've done the first half an hour. Now the second half of the hour is all you, kids. All you. So comments here. Michael says, hey, Dan, what's up? Boy, that's from 111. Sorry, Michael. It's been, we're getting to it. Michael does say Jari looked really good against Tampa Bay. Wasn't his fault. Some of the goals, no defense in front as always. Certainly on the 2 goals in regulation. I certainly gave Jari an absolute pass. There were some people who were mad that he deflected that Cirelli goal into the net. My counter to that was both Erik Karlsson missed Cirelli, just kind of let him go freely. So now Cirelli has speed and the play begins to accelerate. Nola Chari didn't get Brandon Hagel. Erik Karlsson didn't get Brandon Hagel. So Jari is now looking at Cirelli, who kind of has him at his mercy with an oncoming rusher. So I think Jari got caught being ready to deflect the pass and was a little bit surprised that the puck was on him rather than to Hagel. I don't blame the goalie for those sorts of goals. I blame the defense around. So, Michael, you're correct on that. I agree with you. The overtime goal was atrocious, however. The overtime goal was a goaltender biting on not even a good fake, swimming out of the net, leaving it unprotected. That's the sort of stuff that drives people nuts, that drives a coach nuts. Because you get to that point, you've got a chance to win, and your goaltender just abdicates the net. Not really what you want to see. Bonjour, Monsieur Dan. Hello, BJ. All right, Ethan says, hear me out. All right, Ethan, I'm ready. I'm buckled up here. What do I think about O'Connor and Puljujarvi with Crosby? I think they deserve more ice time regardless, but I'd like to see how those 3 play together. No, Ethan, I'm going to kind of circle back to what I just said about O'Connor at center being a much better player than much better center than a winger. I also that would be to expose Puljujarvi. Puljujarvi's playing really well right now in that very defined role. You don't want Puljujarvi having to defend the other team's best players. Also, in the couple opportunities, Crosby, Puljujarvi, zero chemistry. That's a bad mix there, Ethan. It's just, I mean, listen, Sullivan's tried every other line combination, so I'm not saying it wouldn't ever happen, I'm saying don't expect any success if they do. Why do I think Matt Grzelcyk is still in the lineup, playing top pair, power play, and penalty kill? Not saying the scratch guys are lasting solutions, but St. Ivany and Graves can't be much worse. Well, St. Ivany's a right side defenseman, so take him out of the conversation there. St. Ivany also has been really spotty. St. Ivany's job is hard-nosed, good defense, and I can't say that he was providing that. Of course, no one really is. But St. Ivany seemed to have lost his footing this season, and I understand why he's not in the lineup every night. Why, Ryan Graves, before his scratch, had, let's call it 15, good games and improving. However, his last few games were so bad. They were not professional quality. And given how last year went and the rocky start to this season before the train got on the tracks, I can see why coach said, no, good Lord, we have to unplug that, reset it. No. Because I tell you this in no hyperbole or exaggeration, the Ryan Graves, Ryan Shea pair was the worst Penguins defenseman or defensive pairing I have ever seen. Full stop. It was terrible. And that's all I got to say about that. Okay, BJ says the most likely Sullivan scenario: 1, fired this season; 2, fired after this season; 3, relocated to a front office job; 4, completes out his contract with Pittsburgh as the head coach. Most likely scenario, I would have told you 2 months ago, would be number 4, with number 2 being second most likely. Now I think number 1 is most likely, with number 2 still being in second place. It's unfortunate for Mike Sullivan that I think he is coaching his butt off this season. I absolutely think he is doing his best coaching job in several years. It's just that what he's asking, good defense, good, sound, fundamental play, just at least do the simple things, is basically what he's screaming. And if you can't get that, it's hopeless. So Sullivan's going to pay the price. I think things will become untenable sooner than later. The locker room being a little bit broken right now. A couple more losses, if it gets more broken, if they lay down against Winnipeg, or you want to know the truth? I don't know who they play after Winnipeg. I have no clue. No, I don't have a clue who they play after Winnipeg. If they suffer a few more lay down or implosion losses, I think you'll see Sullivan pay the price. But if they win a few of those games, it begins to lengthen the rope, conversely. Christopher says, I hope Reardon is giggling his butt off somewhere. Let's just say I would kill for an off-the-record conversation with Todd Reardon about a couple of the Penguins defensemen. And that's all I got to say about that. Let's go to Gable Fisk. Welcome back, Gable. Let's rewind the clock back to July 1st, 2023. What other team was going to give out the contract that was given to Jari? We get told they had to commit to him, but who were they competing against? Well, we know they were competing against at least the Ottawa Senators, who vastly overspent on Jonas Korpisalo. So we know that part. I think there were a couple or a few other teams. I recall hearing at the time there were 3 teams. So it's easy to go back to that date now because Alex Nedeljkovic has stepped forward. But can you imagine the terror if the Penguins had signed Alex Nedeljkovic to be their new starting goalie last year? Nedeljkovic would not have had the upswing that he's had since then. He probably would have buckled and been overwhelmed by the situation, by the Penguins' terrible defense. You would be running him out of town as well. So it's easy to say they shouldn't have done it. But beside fan emotion, pretty much everyone agreed they had no choice. I will take issue on 5 years. I think they probably, Korpisalo only got 4 years. They might have played hardball with Jari, depending on who the third team was, and said, okay, sure, go to Ottawa. Go spend 50, 60% in taxes and have no chance to win. You know what we're doing here. You play with Sidney Crosby, et cetera, et cetera. You know the sales pitch from a GM to a prospective free agent. They probably could have played a little more hardball. But don't forget, Jari didn't sign until, 4 or 5 o'clock that day. So clearly there was some hardball being played. I don't know. It's difficult to criticize too much. Certainly in hindsight, everything is crystal clear there. Matt Helmer says the signing of the core has hampered the Pens. They are too old. Matt, who are the best 2 players on the Penguins right now? Who are they? Go ahead. 87 and 71. Those are the 2 old guys. It's the guys around them who are absolutely falling down and failing. Shh, don't tell anybody. Everybody likes to say they're too old. Okay, moving on. This is where bumper sticker slogans and feelings just get run over by the reality. Just think, take the $15 million the Penguins have invested in Erik Karlsson and Ryan Graves. Take the $10 million that they have invested in Matt Grzelcyk, Anthony Beauvillier, Kevin Hayes, and Cody Glass. Actually, it's a bit more than $10 million. So take that $26 million. If you really want to drive in the rearview mirror, take that $26 million and realize what could have been accomplished with that much money. And therein lies, if you want to say, here's the problems, or where, what are the problems with the Penguins roster, at $26 million. Although I kind of like Beauvillier. 1.2, gets 6 goals. The Penguins have already achieved, they've already gotten their value out of Anthony Beauvillier. So anything beyond this is probably gravy. Everybody else really needs to get a shovel and start digging in. Okay, Sarah says, if Dubas wanted to keep Crosby, why is Dubas trading everyone away? It's going to be Crosby, Gino, not sure about Tanger and Rusty. That's very true. We have no defense. Dubas doesn't see what he did to Crosby. Oh, I think he does. I think he absolutely does. He can't be blind. I still think there's another shoe to drop with Sidney Crosby. I genuinely do. I think Crosby is so loyal that he is going to grit his teeth and he is going to bear this out. He's going to ride to the end until someone taps him on the shoulder and says, Sid, you don't have to do this, man. You don't have to. We're going to build a statue for you anyway. We're going to retire your number anyway. You don't have to do this. That's, you almost feel like Crosby is one of those people on the Florida coast who's boarding up their house. They're going to ride through this hurricane because of, a sense of self and home and loyalty. I, like many of you, would hope for better for him. Okay. Yep, Sarah's correct. Dubas brought in the wrong players for the lineup. I think there just isn't any other way to say it. Matt thinks Crosby is angry. Shelly Anderson got Sidney Crosby one-on-one today. Shelly and I had the same story idea, and so when she told me her idea, I'm like, run with it. Go. You go, girl. We're going to have that on Pittsburgh Hockey Now. I'm not sure when she'll finish it up, probably about 4 or 5 o'clock. She asked him the very personal question. That's where she led with, and I loved it. So I don't know. I don't know what he said. I'm waiting to read the story like all of you. Okay, let's see here. Some cross conversation going. They sat on the lead on Tuesday, Ron says. Well, they have alternately sat on leads and been entirely stupid with them. You can't say it's been one thing. They haven't been trying to sit on all of these leads. They've just made incredibly bad turnovers with these leads. They have made just unbelievable, inexplicable, mind-boggling, bewildering, what in God's name are you thinking defensive reads with these leads? And I think they would tell you that. In fact, they have told us that. And so it's going to get to a point where they either get it, click. I've never seen a group implode like this. I mean, these are veteran players making these mistakes. But as we've been over in this podcast, this live chat, the players making the mistakes are, in fact, mistake-prone players. I suppose you can't ask more. You can't demand a leopard change his spot simply because you need him to. Chicken a la King says Sully is not a rebuild coach. Are you sure about that? Don't forget, he was hired as the Wilkes-Barre Scranton coach back in 2015. Don't forget how well he performed with talented young players in 15 and 16 and 17. Don't forget all of that. I think some of you assume, incorrectly I might add, that there have been a host of other talented young players who have been shafted or screwed over by Mike Sullivan, and that is the furthest from the truth. Those players weren't good enough. How many teams has Daniel Sprong been on again? Seattle now twice, or Vancouver twice. Vancouver twice. Yeah, it's also, the Penguins got Marcus Pettersson for Sprong, so it was a really good trade. There haven't been any Penguins prospects. Think about this. The 2017 draft produced 0 NHL games. The entire class. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round picks, 0. The only time in Penguins history that has happened was the 2017 draft. Zachary Lazon was out of hockey as a junior player because of concussions. Their 3rd round pick, defenseman Clayton Phillips, was not good enough for professional hockey. I don't know if he ever bothered to play in the ECHL or not. He had a couple of game tryout after a 5-year collegiate career, and Wilkes-Barre only played him a couple of games, and that was the end of that. I seem to recall he went to Florida to play in the ECHL for a minute. I don't know how long he lasted there either. That's a 3rd round pick. That's how poorly the Penguins were drafting and developing for years. You think back to 2012 and 2013 when they pulled players like Matt Murray and Tristan Jarry and Brian Rust and Jake Gensel in subsequent rounds after round 1. They didn't have a 1st round pick, I think, in those. 2012 they certainly did. Oli Mata. They missed on Derek Pouliot, but we'll sweep that under the rug. Never mind, nothing to see here. Olimata, but those other players I mentioned were second and third and fourth round picks that they were getting value for. And then that sort of just stopped in 2015, 2016. 2015 was the last time they really had any player who played any games for them. That was Daniel Sprong and, wait for it, Dominic Simone as a fifth rounder. To Sullivan not being a good rebuild coach, how many rookies are in the lineup right now? 4. You could have 5, I think. But there are 4 rookies in the lineup. And those rookies are being well coached, and they're playing pretty well. I certainly like what I see from Sam Poulin. For the first time in his career, I like what I'm seeing at the NHL level. I really like what I'm seeing from Owen Pickering. I wrote about his penalty kill against Tampa Bay when he was tight to Nikita Kucherov. Imagine being a 20-year-old rookie, your second NHL game, you look to your left, and you have to blanket Nikita Kucherov. There are 2 ways to go with that. Either you get up on your toes and you're ready for that, or there's a pit in your stomach, and it looks like Pickering got up on his toes. He took away time and space from Kucherov, and the one time Kucherov pulled back in that right circle, pulled back for some space, and Pickering wisely kind of left him have it. Tampa Bay tried to set up the one-timer in the slot. Pickering laid down that 10-foot-long stick and broke up the pass. That's exactly how you should do it. Pickering is doing a lot of good things, and increasingly so. Jack St. Ivany is still technically a rookie as well. So there's plenty to like about Sullivan and young players. I'm not prepared to say he's a bad rebuild coach. I do think that they're going to have to come to some sort of consensus on where they go from here, though. You can't have a rebuild underway at the same time you're trying to win now. Those 2 things are entirely incongruent. Just completely, they don't match. You're either trying to improve Owen Pickering, Sam Poulin, Jack St. Ivany, Valtteri Puustinen. Who am I missing? Vasily Ponomarev, who is kind of struggling right now at the NHL game. He really is struggling with the Penguins system and the NHL game. Regardless, Sullivan didn't bench him totally against Tampa Bay, but he played him sparingly. He still put him out there in the third period. He still put him out there a couple times in the second period. It wasn't a complete benching, but it was a we don't trust this guy sort of playing time night. I think your perceptions, people need to open their perceptions and look more at reality than the bumper sticker slogans and the anger or the emotion of the moment. Now, Sullivan, the best coach for the Penguins right now, I don't know anymore. I just... Yeah, like I said, I don't think he finishes the season. But that's not to say he couldn't. It's not to say he can't. That's not to say he's lost the room either. Infamous Boy says, play the kids. The kids have to earn it first. And more are. I mean, look, like I just mentioned, they've got, 4 and 5 in the lineup. As they earn it, they get put in. What do you want? All right, Sonny says it's not that Sullivan is a bad coach. It's that the rest of the league has had a decade to counter and negate the Sullivan system. All right, Sonny, I spent so much time in the beginning of the show on what the Sullivan system is. You need to tell me. This is what kind of drives me nuts. What is the Sullivan system? When Francis just told you that 27 other teams sort of play a version of it, what is it? Go ahead. I mean, that's the frustrating part to me. Okay, Gary says, "What exactly is Sullivan's system at this point?" Gary, I'm Gary. I appreciate you always showing up here for these live chats. The first line, I've spent way too much time on it. I can't. I'm not redoing the first 30 minutes of the podcast. With salary retained, I am hoping for a good return on Marcus Pettersson. Why would they retain salary on Pettersson? You're still going to get a great second-round pick, if not I think maybe closer to the deadline, you might get a first-round pick for Marcus Pettersson. If Philadelphia can get a first for Sean Walker, I believe the Penguins can get pretty close to a first-round pick for Marcus Pettersson. That's my deal. Jake Bacon, what's up, Dan? Do I sense that Sullivan is starting to lose the room? No, I don't think he's losing the room. I think the room is losing the room. I think the room is losing confidence. I think the room is questioning their existence together. I think the trade rumors don't help. They hear them. I don't care what any player says. The only guy I ever believed who said he didn't hear them was Phil Kessel. Because I knew he had checked out. He didn't pay any attention to any of us. And that I believed. Everybody else, yeah, they know. They hear that stuff. And it's not a matter of checking out on Mike Sullivan. I think Sullivan is in the same boat as the players. So I think from a standpoint, they're all rowing together. Look at the first two periods against Tampa Bay. They're rowing together. The team certainly didn't check out on Sullivan when they had a 2-0 lead on Tampa Bay. It's just that mental block, that lack of confidence, that lack of killer instinct that is warehoused within each of them. It ain't there. It's just not possible. Let's go to Gary here. Now I'll take this question. Frankly, at this point, it's time to call up McGroarty, Koivunen, Bros, and stop playing Yeto, Achari, Hayes. Why? Because they're young kids and you want to see what they can do? Stop it! Not that I get frustrated by that. I mean, listen, as soon as any of those players are ready, they're going to be here. Period. If you bring them up too early, if you dunk them in the deep water before they are ready, you hurt the player. So if your goal is, in fact, to get the young players ready and in the lineup, you do not call them up too soon. Let's see here. Okay. BJ says the Sullivan system hinges on an entire team skating well, super mobile defensemen who can make a breakout pass and pinch and be responsible forwards who track back. Yeah, that's the gist of it. Yeah, and when you have defensemen, although there is space for defensemen who aren't that mobile, Jack Johnson, Eric Goodbranson, Jack St. Ivany. There certainly can be space. I mean, Marcus Pettersson isn't exactly fleet o' foot either. There's space for him too. But everyone has to do their job. The problem with the Sullivan system and the way hockey is going, this positionless hockey, which is what it's called, this 5-man positionless hockey is kind of a problem with the Penguins because some guys don't skate well and some guys don't defend well, and you have this breakdown because of their breakdowns. You have the problem that are individual affecting the team. Let's see here. Carl, like to see them as a second line? I have no idea who you're talking about, Carl. You have to kind of give me more information on who you'd like to see as the second line. Ron said as soon as Tampa Bay made it 2-1, you said, here we go again. Yeah, that's... I think the Penguins did, certainly. They never got on their toes. They never pushed back. They never really fought back. They had 4 shots in the third period. How in the world in a 2-0, 2-1, 2-2 game do you get 4 shots? They had none in overtime. So in the final 24 minutes of the game, 4 shots. That's just incredible to me. Let's see here. Ron doesn't like Matt Nieto. I mean, as a fourth-line winger, what are you asking for here? Also, the guy hasn't played hockey in a year. There's going to be some adjustments, okay? If we're talking about guys who are good defensively, can skate hard, skate fast, track back, and complete their task, Nieto is one. He's not going to give you much offense. But I think right now the Penguins would settle for some forwards who can be shut down defensive forwards. Uliker and Carlson. You can't hold the guys back. They have to play. Feel joy on the ice. The coach is on the wrong track. Interesting. I don't necessarily think the first part of that connects with the reality. I don't think Sullivan is holding the guys back at all. And that the entire point of how Sullivan has devised his scheme, his style of play, is in fact for the guys to feel that joy and go. Let's see here. Steven Wagner. Can you assemble a Czar, Bluger, Tanev shutdown line out of the Pittsburgh and Wilkes-Barre Scranton rosters? I think you could have. I think that was the plan. And I think it's kind of close, but Blake Lizotte is the linchpin. That line played effectively at the end of periods and against top lines. It absolutely did. And they've been missing that since Aston Reese especially. Aston Reese looks like, or appeared to be, a bigger part of that line than any of us realized. But I thought that Lizotte with Achari on the wing and whomever they put on the left wing could have been that line, but Lizotte has just had the worst luck. I mean, think about this. He's skating by the net, gets hit in the head with a puck. He's sitting on the bench, he gets hit in the head with a puck. That's some of the worst luck I've seen since Marty Straka in 2002 when he dropped the weights on himself. Or I think something broke and dropped the weights on him. Yeah, it's pretty brutal luck. And then later in that season, that's when Marty Straka caught the rut in the terrible Civic Arena ice and broke his leg. I mean, that Blake Lizotte is having a Marty Straka kind of year. I don't know that Ponomarev could participate in a defensive shutdown line. I'm not seeing a guy. I'm not seeing what I want to see from Ponomarev right now. Let's put it that way. Could Sam Poulin? I think there will be some trial and error, but yes, I do think the ingredients exist for that sort of shutdown line. Noel Achari did miss on Hagel, and that's a problem. That they have to move Achari off out of center. I think he's hurting himself, and he's not helping the team as much at center. Just whatever they have to do, they've got to find a way to get him onto the wing. Let's see here. Golden Doodles. Sometimes a team needs a goalie who can cover for defensive gaffes in multiple games. Jari is not that goalie. The Pens have a bad D 95% of the games. I thought Jari covered up for them in Tampa Bay, against Tampa Bay, I should say, until the end. Jari has certainly not covered for them this season, but in past, I think you all forget the first 60 games last year when Jari really covered for the defenseman. Stole, I don't know how many points for the team. If it wasn't for Tristan Jari last season, the Penguins would have been 15 points out of a playoff spot by the end of March. I'm not joking on that. I think that part gets forgotten because Jari has struggled so mightily this season. I mean, Jari's game went away. Whether health-related, mental-related, just a bad funk, whatever it was, Jari's game clearly had gone away from him. So I don't know. I tend to suspect he'll get it back at least to some degree. I don't think it helps when the home fans are booing you. I don't think it helps when your defense is as bad as it's been. You need I'm going to make a comparison here. Goaltenders are sort of like backup quarterbacks. Let me pull up here. Goaltenders, like backup quarterbacks who are coming into the game. Sometimes you have to build their confidence. You have to toss 7 or 8 yard passes just to get their feet wet. Sometimes 3 or 4 yard passes, get their feet wet, get them confident, get them in a rhythm. In this case, I think the Penguins have to protect their goaltenders for a game or two, rather than hoping on a nightly basis their goaltender bails them out. That if the Penguins protected their goalie for a night or two, gave them an easy evening, you might see the goaltender begin to steal points for them on the not so good nights. Let's go to Georgia. Georgia's been on my mind. I see guys who I have no idea what that word is. I see guys can't go up a flight of stairs calling Malkin and Letang bums. What the heck? These guys don't owe me. I've been a Pens fan during the good times. I will be a Pens fan during the bad. A lot to be said for that. Bummer that Sid and Gino's last years as Penguins will be with the dumpster fire seasons. What's the quote from Batman? You can die a hero or live long enough to be the villain. I was talking with somebody in the organization today about that very thing. Fans have already turned on Malkin and Crosby. Malkin and Letang. Those two always had a high level of detractors anyway. Just for whatever reason. There was always the Crosby crowd who couldn't let you like both Malkin and Crosby, so they had to put down the other one, or it was just a high school lunch table for the Penguins fan base for quite a while. So I think fans have largely turned on Malkin and Letang in a couple of years. If Sidney Crosby isn't great, will you turn on him too? I'm curious. You say no now. 100% of you say no now. Talk to me in a couple of years. I dare you make the lineup. It's not Sully's fault. Okay, I have no idea what that means, but we're just going to roll on. I get the last part. I get the second sentence. The first part, Georgia said, I get the feeling Carlson doesn't care. I can see that. There is certainly a nonchalance to parts of his game, especially when he makes a mistake. Doesn't care might be a bit strong. I hope that's not the case. I can see where it might rub you the wrong way. I can see where it might rub the coaches the wrong way as well. Michael's back. It's crazy we can keep up with the Lightning but lose 6-2 to the Jackets. What is our identity this year? Seems like the same as last year. Inconsistent. It absolutely is. Their identity emerges when they're playing well. They're a down-low team. They're a grind-it up. They're not a team that plays on the rush anymore. They're a team that dumps it into the right corner. The correct corner based on various factors, and goes and gets it and pounds away down low and gets to the net and tries to get the chances within 4 or 5 feet. That's when they're playing well. Or they seem to be in love with these low to high tip plays. All right, knock yourselves out. When they're not playing well, they don't even have the puck when they're not playing well. They're that bad. Let's see here. Raymond, I've been a Pens fan since the mid-'70s. What's happening to them happens to all the good teams. Goes in cycles. Just watch. They will get better. The problem, Raymond, is when. I'm going to be writing about this. I'm going to put Raymond's comment back up there. I'm going to be writing about this. Dubas has left himself vulnerable for a couple or a few years. There is a flaw. There is a hole in Dubas's plan in which players will be leaving before new players will be arriving. And there's going to be a 2 to 5 year gap in which they are going to absolutely suck. And I don't mean be kind of bad. Unless they can figure out a way to bring in a handful of bedrock good players via free agency. Unless they can figure that out, they're going to be terrible from, let's say, 2026 to 2028. Absolutely awful. They are going to be the worst team in the league, probably. I don't know if that's by design or if that's, I don't know if that's a feature or a flaw with this team right now. Think of how bad or how frustrated you are now. Imagine taking away all of these players and not really having good players to replace them. Yeah, at this point, I suspect that for a while, Kyle Dubas is going to look like the Roadrunner with Acme products, Acme roller skates, as he tries to patch holes and the team tries to catch up. All right, let's go with Sean Connolly. Not Connery, but Connolly. In the contracts that we have, so many overpaid, underperforming talents. Essentially, Dubas traded away bad contracts for other bad contracts. Just a lateral move. That's it. What we needed to do was sign Gensel, ship out our overpriced defense, and use that money for forward depth. Second half of that, I'm sure you've got a plan, Sean. But yeah, I think you're kind of, again, in hindsight, I was tepid on Karlsson coming in. I thought for the wrong reasons, actually, that Karlsson wouldn't work. I thought Karlsson and Letang would eventually clash and there'd be too much offensive defenseman. Perhaps I'm not entirely wrong there, given how the Penguins can't defend a lead, but I can't say I'm right on that. Karlsson has not worked out for other reasons, regardless of his fit with Letang. All right, let's go down to, let's see here. I want to get somebody new. Nate S. Love your content, even as a Caps fan. Thanks, Nate. It's good to see Crosby and Malkin still playing at an incredible level. Wish they had more around them to help them. I wish them both well. That remains their best game of the season, Nate. The Penguins at Capital One Arena. No question about it. That was easily their best game of the season. They still blew a 2-0 lead. Washington got a little bit lucky, didn't they? The Capitals got a little bit lucky because Nick Backstrom stepped away. TJ Oshie stepped away. That frees up a whole lot of money for the Capitals to go do things, like Jacob Chikrin, like Logan Thompson. Even the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade was kind of a nothing to lose sort of deal. And I think it's working out for them. I don't know if it's working out great, but it's working out. And Washington, when the Penguins were throwing their first round picks at people, like underwear to Tom Jones concert, the Capitals kept theirs. You know, the Capitals kept their first round pick. Sort of. I'm trying to think of an ugly singer. I'm trying to think of an ugly singer I could say, kind of like underwear. I can't think of an ugly one. Who help me out here? Who would I go with? Oh, anyway, you get my drift. Way to waste a joke, Dan. Way to screw that one up. Let's go back to Golden Doodles for life. Have there been many or any teams that have been able to rebuild on the fly while staying competitive? I think the Capitals are doing as good of a job as you can. The Rangers had a very quick turnaround, but they didn't have all-time players they had to contend with. The Rangers were able to trade away or let walk the Derek Brassards of the world, the Brian Boyles, Derek Brassards, and so on and so forth. They turned it around very quickly. So did the LA Kings. But there again, if you go back to the LA Kings Stanley Cups, Drew Doughty and Anze Kopitar were kind of newish. They didn't have, Kopitar at 30 years old winning a Stanley Cup. They had Kopitar at like 27 winning Stanley Cup. So it's an entirely different situation there in LA. But there again, they turned it around in a couple or a few years. In part, they also kept their draft picks. They also had a system that was consistent over multiple coaches. And until Jonathan Quick kind of fell off the wagon there. Time out. I didn't say that. His play fell off the table. That's what I meant to say. Oh, boy. When you speak for an hour and a half, sometimes you're going to say something that you didn't mean to say. Until Quick's play fell off rapidly, LA had a great goaltender, too. Let's get to wrap this up here, because when I post an hour and a half video on YouTube, nobody watches it. All right, Dima says, I love this more empirical, unemotional, and factual analysis of the team. I don't know if I'm empirical, certainly unemotional and factual. I always love Coach Francis's breakdowns of players and plays of the team. Clearly, there is a disconnect between Dubas and Sullivan. I believe there is, even if they have a good relationship. Don't forget, Kyle Dubas at the draft specifically said, I'll be doing things that the players or coaches might not like. I'm paraphrasing, but he was pretty blunt about that, where they want to win. I'm going to be looking at it from a much different perspective. I think that says it all. And so you spend $6 million on Cody Glass and Kevin Hayes. You spend almost $3 million on Matt Grzelcyk because you can get him on a 1-year contract rather than having to give a different veteran 3 or 4 years. That's what they wanted. They wanted that 1-year contract so they can trade somebody at the deadline to recoup assets. If they're out of the playoffs, of course. All right, here I'm gonna go to the bottom here. Let's see here. Stephen Wagner, would St. Ivany benefit from going to Wilkes-Barre for a short while to get his game back? I don't think he passes through waivers. He didn't have to pass through waivers in training camp. I don't know if he's played too many games now where that has changed. I think he would be waiver exempt. Here's the problem, Stephen. In a vacuum, I like what you say. In practice, the Penguins have only 3 right-handed defensemen. Letang, Carlson, St. Ivany. Ryan Shea is not proving capable of playing on the right side. So what would you do if you send St. Ivany down? You hit a brick wall at that point. Ugly singer, Meatloaf. There you go. Yeah. So there you go. Like underwear to Meatloaf concert. Steven Tyler? He might be ugly, but let's just say I don't think he lacked for female fans. And we're going to stop it there. Let's see here. Maybe they want to be the worst team in the league to get a number 1 draft pick. Well, you're going to have to be there for a few years because you no longer get the number 1 draft pick by being the worst team in the league. You might draft 2nd or 3rd, and there can be quite a bit of gap between number 1 and number 2, or number 1 and number 3. That's where I because you have been through it, I'm going to wrap up on this thought. I'm done after this, I promise. Here's what I think a lot of you, because you've been through it twice before or once before. I've been through it twice with Mario and then covering the Crosby, or actually, let me put it in chronological order. The Orpik, Fleury, Malkin, Crosby, Stahl drafts. Don't forget to add Letang into that 2005 draft as a third-round pick. That you assume by being bad, you get good players. Not always true. In fact, it's kind of a crapshoot. Think of how many number one draft picks the Edmonton Oilers had and how many completely washed out. And they were still a bad team. They kept getting number one picks over and over and over again. Think of how many top 5 picks the Columbus Blue Jackets have had over the last 20 years. The Ottawa Senators, same deal. Buffalo Sabres are just a hopeless organization. Some teams in each league are hopelessly cursed, and the Buffalo Sabres seem to be that team in hockey, no matter what they do. No matter what they do, the hockey gods are going to just keep moving the carpet until they yank it out from under them. Just about the time they're ready, and the hockey gods go, oops, and pull the carpet. The Penguins seem to be one of those blessed teams that have been able to get Mario and Yager and Crosby and Malkin. I don't know if the hockey gods will give them another bite at that kind of apple for a long, long time. And that is why drafting first overall isn't the panacea, isn't necessarily the end game for a lot of this. You're honest to goodness, you're almost better in building a team with a hole in that number one center spot and hoping to lure a free agent or trading draft picks. Once you get to a certain point, trading away picks and prospects to get that number one center. You're almost better doing that. And my example for that, the Vegas Golden Knights, when they finally got Jack Eichel, now it was Stanley Cup time. Columbus has always been looking for that guy. Nashville tried with Ryan Johansson and various entities. They're trying again by getting, all the veterans, Stamkos and Marchessault, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a guarantee, Angie. I wish I could tell you, you stink for 3 years, you get 3 Hall of Fame players. All right. And with that, I have done 1 hour and 28 minutes. No pucks given. Make sure to sign up for the downloads and the automatic downloads, because I'll be doing a couple and a few a week. Also, we'll do the live chat again next week. If I can, we'll do it on a Wednesday. If not, we got to wait until a Thursday. I appreciate all of you. The numbers I was looking at the live numbers as we were doing this. Always, 80 people. Given the people who come and go, that's several hundred over the next day or so. We'll get, another 1,000 or 2,000 people. And I'm humbled by that. Truly, I am. Enjoy the Steelers on Thursday night. I've got some humdingers of some Penguins columns on the way. And otherwise, have fun.